welcome to Behind the Mask. I'm one of your co-hosts, EJ, and Lori and T are joining me today. This is episode 44, The Mask of Academic and Job Performance. Just a friendly reminder that anything discussed in this podcast is not to be used as a diagnosis or replacement for conversations with your own doctors, therapists, psychologists, or other medical professionals. In this episode, we're going to talk about, as I said, job and academic performance, but we're going to focus more on our personalities and the effects and effects of those. We can all take tests, and the tests will tell us what our aptitude might fit into, but those might not necessarily be in our interest bank. We might not be able to financially attend a school. We may not be able to pursue that degree to get to that job. And for me, I personally was told I'd be best in recently, I was told I would be best in tech and finance, which is awesome because I'm kind of falling into that realm. But when I was younger, I had been told I would be good for a teacher or a nurse, which I am not interested in either. So that is definitely interest. Lori had taken a test that told her she'd be good as a movie producer or a politician. And Tina, recently had taken the test and it said she'd be good as a counselor or a teacher, which definitely is in her wheelhouse. And yeah, so we're going to talk a little bit about that, a little bit of our experiences in all the jobs we've done. And yeah, so anybody want to share or start?
I just think these, especially when it comes to jobs and academics and things, the third thing on almost anything I've ever taken says teacher. So, but as I realized, teacher in the traditional sense of being in the classroom might not really kind of be my thing, but mentor and group leader and administrator and all those things are in my wheelhouse. And they're all under that teaching, subheading, I guess. Mm-hmm. Movie producer, doesn't that sound glamorous? I got that from a test that I took not long after I had arrived here, newly after, running, being on the run and the voice. I'm like, movie director. Maybe if I was back in LA or somewhere else and I wasn't a single mom with 2 kids and, it sounds so great. I do love theater and movies and everything associated with the film industry, but I just didn't really think that I would be able to pursue that. And I've always, as a history major, I love history. And I've always loved political science until recently. Is there an era named Trump now? I don't know. But it's not just him. It's the way that our country is now. I don't want to delve into this too much, but I've just been thoroughly discouraged with any version of politics. And so I used to be, I did Young Republicans back in the day. I was did some letter stuffing, and I even got to help out with a couple of campaigns. I very much enjoyed politics when I was younger. But I don't think that I ever thought that I could be the politician,
So here's the thing is it might not be a politician like in that sense, like running for office and stuff like that. However, what is a politician? What do they do? It often involves leadership. It often involves being aware of what people want and advocating for that in different areas like that. Yeah. So yes. Politician isn't just someone who runs for office.
Thank you for that reminder. And it's always been a passion of mine to help those who never voted. And they had all these reasons. And I would, just through our friendship, I would share my passions for my patriotic country and that I live in, and how important it is to remember to vote and to take it seriously and do all those things. And so I was kind of a teacher in that way. And I have convinced many people who thought voting was worthless to vote, to take the time to vote. And I think that that's been a huge, huge part of my life. So yeah, I guess I kind of got to be a politician without, running for office. So thank you for that. And currently right now, I life coaching and mentoring and just kind of enjoying a non-traditional teaching role. So yeah, so I kind of feel like it worked out. Yeah. What about you, T?
So, I've taken different aptitude tests over the years in high school and throughout, and always came up with like a teacher, counselor, nurse, stuff like that. I think the struggle for me at times is that sometimes I can be a bit of, I want to do everything. I want, if for example, a need for a certain kind of nurse in our area came up, and I'm like, I should go back to school and be that kind of nurse. Not that I don't love what I do, but a need was expressed, and I instantly want to jump into that role. I've even gone so far as to, we need a family attorneys in our area that will help low-income families. And I was like, oh, maybe I'll go back to school for that. And then I had to sit back on my heels for a minute and go, wait a minute, I don't like conflict. Right. That's probably not a good idea.
Yeah.
So having to be aware of that things can sometimes sound fun or sound interesting, or there's a need. And because that's part of my personality type of wanting to see a need, fill a need type of response, I have to be careful, because yeah, I can be good at a lot of things. Even being an attorney, I could be good at that. But does it really fit who I am? And would I be really that comfortable with it? Because over time, that would break me down, not being comfortable with something. So yeah, definitely having to be aware of all of the aspects of who I am, and not just the fact that I love to learn and love to do, and everything in this world to me is about teaching. I could literally go anywhere and it would be about teaching, regardless of what I'm doing. So, and that's something God taught me not too long ago, is that no matter where I'm at, I can do it. I can do the teaching, I can do the counseling, I can do all of that. So
yeah, I think it's important to really quick to remember that we grow and change, and we have seasons in life. So when I took this latest test, it was like marketing. Being an extrovert, I can talk. I do like some concepts within marketing, but I think you're right. I'm a see a need, fill a need kind of person a lot. And so I feel like at different times in my life, that's exactly what I've done, is see the need, fill the need. It wasn't exactly who I am or what I wanted to do, but I've changed over the years too. And so even though my career really would have been in the hospitality industry, in service, I found other ways to serve people now. And so I'm really glad that I did, because, my body for the longest time couldn't continue to serve the way that I was used to serving in the hospitality industry. But so now and that's the other thing too, our bodies physically change. So then sometimes we have to adapt those things. So, all right, Miss EJ.
I have a lot to say on this topic, only because I've kind of been struggling, and not in a bad way, but like when I was in high school, I took a test and it said I would be good at a teacher or nurse. And so I totally agree with what you guys were saying earlier about like teacher doesn't just fit in a box, and nurse just doesn't fit in a box. Like, so I did fall into that. Like, I did fall into a nurse type job because I was caring as a caregiver. It is not something I ever wanted or desired to do. So it would definitely fall under a job category. It was a need money. I could do it. I'm gonna, and not that I'm not grateful for that experience, because I know as a Christian too, God calls us to serve the elderly, serve those less fortunate, serve those who can't do for themselves. So I'm happy to do that. And there's always going to be a care and a concern bone in my body. Like, I'm always going to have that. But I also, like, all through school, like up until senior year in high school, I wanted to be a marine biologist. Like, nothing was going to deter me for that. And then I got exposed to computers and computer programming, and I went, I want to go into computers, and like totally changed at the last minute. And, I went to college. I got a degree in web design that just kind of sat on a shelf for like almost 20 years because I couldn't get into the tech world. What I had a degree in was not what they were looking for at the time. But I had a lot of off the job or personal experience because I loved computers. I built part of my own computer. I'd done different stuff like that. And I had picked up skills along the way personally that, definitely don't fall into the what skills do you have category, because they want to know what your education background is. And I think it makes me struggle a lot when they focus so much on your previous job experience and your education, because many of us have a lot of skills that don't fall into what we were educated in. And that's the difference. We're going to talk a little later about knowing the differences between jobs and careers and hobbies and passions and vocations, because they're all different. And doing one job, you'll have free time. You may pick up a hobby, and the next thing you know, that's your career. That hobby, which is what's happening with me. Like, I like messing around on the computer and doing different things and, helping people out. And so, again, with the teacher thing, I'm not a fan of teaching, and I don't have the patience for it, but I can sit through and kind of, walk somebody through something. And when they get it great. And then I can move on, whereas I feel because I have several friends who are teachers, and my mom worked in a school. So I definitely had the experience around me, enough to know that I did not want to pursue teaching. And, I didn't grow up, we were comfortable. We had everything we needed. We didn't do a lot of traveling because we didn't have, the extra money. So there wasn't a lot of money for me to continue doing a lot of schooling. And I was an only child, so I didn't really know what it was out there for like scholarships and grants and stuff. So I didn't do a lot of schooling after I got my web design degree. The shoulda, coulda, wouldas, I should have gone back. Yeah, I should have applied. I could have done this. I could have done that. But I feel like everything in my past has gotten me to where I'm at now. And I know going back as a non-traditional student is just as good as others. And there's like what I'm doing right now, my business partner's taking my experience and all the stuff I'm teaching him. And he's like, yeah, you need to be in this position. Not because I have the education background. It's just because I know what I'm talking about. And I'm so grateful that he's giving me that opportunity. And I'm wanting to tear the paper ceiling. And I don't know if anybody's heard that term, but look it up. It's literally about how many of these jobs out there teaching, any kind of finances, any kind of legal. I mean, granted, there's certain ones. Doctors, of course, you need education. There's reasons for it. But sometimes I'm like, if I have the skills and I can read a book, it doesn't mean I have to, have a piece of paper that says, I did this class. And so I kind of, I'm I don't know, tearing that ceiling a little bit by doing what I'm doing.
It'd be interesting if certain vocations and certain fields had a way to assess that, a person's skills versus education. So, like you said, there's certain fields that have to have that education, but there is so much talk of how do we do this and be able to get people with those skills regardless of education. And I think there needs to be a way to assess that. In each field it's different, but I know for certain that if I were an employer and I wanted to hire someone, I would want to know that, how do I know they know what they know? And a lot of times we just rely so heavily on that degree. What degree does this person have, and does it translate to this job? Well, there's got to be another way to assess that. And I know that there's a lot of jobs, even retail, that will assess your personality or certain types of scenarios that you might end up in, and what would you do. There's ways to assess that, and they use that as part of their hiring tools. There's got to be a way to kind of generalize that in other areas too, so that it can accommodate skills and experience versus education.
I do believe they are trying to do that. I got to hear of a wonderful experience this past weekend. EJ and I were just at a women's conference, and a longtime friend of mine was there, and she was so excited to share that her husband had finally gotten an engineering job. Mind you, he does not have a degree in engineering. This is one of those that you're like, this could never happen. And it just did. His brain, he's amazing with math and science. And he had a friend who was at the top of his career, who knew that he would be dedicated, and they didn't know exactly where they were going to put him and how this was going to work, because he didn't have any of the technical things needed for this job, except that once he got hired in this very apprenticeship position, he's now teaching the elders, because he thinks outside the box, because he's just got this amazing brain that is now being used. And I was like, wow, awesome. That's definitely a job career that you'd be like, no, gotta have the degree. And yet here he is proving that wrong, and I love it.
I totally agree. And I'm not saying that school is bad, but you can see that somebody had that degree, but they might have got that degree at, a C- student, like I don't know. Yeah. So I feel like their on the job skills is going to prove more than what they, so yeah, things are definitely changing. Unfortunately, the United States still is charging major money for schools and stuff. And, there's other countries that do offer free higher education. So that's really awesome that they figured out a way to do that. I don't see the US doing that anytime soon. So unless there's more money out there for kids to go to school, it's really going to be tough for certain kids to go to school. And
okay, so here's where I have to speak up, sorry. There's a lot of money out there.
Well,
I just want to, let me finish. I want to encourage someone that there is money out there. There is a lot of money out there. And you may need someone like me to help you figure out how to tell your story. But that's all that you need to do. If you're out there and you're thinking, I can't do this, I'm telling you, you can. You can. If you want to go back to school, I don't care how old you are. There are two of us in this video, in this podcast, that were non-traditional students. We went back and we didn't fit in because we were so much older. And I went to a private university where I was old enough to be all of their parents, even more, because you went to a state school where I think non-traditional at that time was still far more encouraged than in the setting that I was in. But I want to encourage people don't ever think that you can't do it. Don't ever think that it's not possible. And not, yes, look for alternatives. Yes, look for, think outside the box. But if you want that degree, then I'm telling you, learn how to tell your story in one page and go get it. Please go get it. I think it's really, really important. They're all good ways. However you choose to do it, just don't quit. Don't not pursue it because you think that you can't, or because you think that there isn't any money, because we don't live in a country that, pays for that. I want to tell you it's possible. Please, please go. Sorry, I'm very passionate about that.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. But here's why I have a lot to say about this topic, because I think school's wasted time, because I don't feel like in school a book learning is all that it is. There's a difference between book smarts and street smarts. And there was so much that I did not learn in school that I've learned now. And you don't have to have a degree to pursue some of these jobs. And while, yes, like Lori said, there's plenty out there, and more so now. And there's, when I was going to school, there wasn't a catalog of scholarships availability online to go and click on, like, oh, I want to apply for that one. There wasn't that. And so I was really limited on what I could and couldn't do. And I also lived in an area and I wasn't ready to leave home. And I think that's, others too, where they grew up, region, city, state, a lot of kids aren't ready to go, and some are ready. Like, some are ready to go off to college. I wasn't. And, as I reflect back now, there were other reasons why I wasn't ready. And it worked out that I was able to step up and take care of my parents, which gave me that nursing kind of experience that, I've kind of had over the last 10 years. But which, again, I'm grateful for being able to be the caregiver that I have been. But that also gave me some downtime to also really enjoy online and tech stuff. That's moving me into a different position. So yeah, I remember being and sitting in some of my college classes, which, at school, like when you go to a college, they do an assessment, like you test into the math class, the English class, and stuff like that. So, I tested into calculus because of my brain. And, English 101, just your basic English, which is pretty much every degree. That's the minimum required, unless you're going to go for an English major. Yeah, so I just remember sitting in some of my classes and just being like, this is such a waste of time. I was so bored. And I love learning. I love picking up a book and reading about something, but sitting in a class, listening to a teacher drone on about a topic that they barely even know because they just got thrown at this last semester or something, just so they can get a paycheck. Because there are some teachers in college that do not want to be there. They're just there for a paycheck too. So yeah, I didn't have the greatest experience in college. So I'm grateful that I've been able to do this a non-expected way, a non-traditional way. I don't know.
So here's the thing: is these things are very individual, right? Yeah, sure. Everybody has it's more than just academics. It's more than just a job. It's our life experiences that drive us to where we go or where we end up at. And where we end up at isn't the end. It's just where we're at in the moment. For me, I was a dropout. I dropped out twice. I did not have a high school diploma. And so when I get clients who are like, I can't, I never finished school. I'm like, neither did I. I dropped out twice. Then, excuse me, I went and got my GED, went to college to get a certificate in clerical and word processing. Yeah, clerical and word processing, which was the stupidest thing for me to get, because not only am I an introvert, I have social anxiety. So I'm holding the certificate that I'm not going to use. Why? Because it terrifies me to do those things. Now, the word processing part was definitely something that I was keen on. I love that part. I love data entry. I'm kind of a dork that way, but I love data entry. I loved the idea of working with computers like you, EJ. It turned out to be something that I had a very strong aptitude for. Mm-hmm. But I was too scared to go get it. So I spent most of my adult life, with the exception of 2 years, well, 3 years total, but all the rest of it until 2004, I worked in fast food. And in some ways, I loved it, especially if I didn't have to work frontline. I loved it. Mm-hmm. I love the stress of it. Sometimes I still to this day, I'll miss it because there was work to it. And something I learned as a kid is that no matter what I'm doing in the moment, you can find something about it I like, even if I don't want to do it forever. Mm-hmm. So I had this certificate. I worked in an answering service for 2 years, which is mind blowing considering that I have that social anxiety and that introversion. Like asking me to make a phone call is like telling me I might as well go in and pull my teeth out with pliers because
right.
yeah, that's what it felt like for me. But it was a job. I had to pay the bills. And the irony is, even though I'm introverted and I have social anxiety, I'm still really good with people. So yeah, so I was able to make that work. And then I worked in some retail environments for a little bit here and a little bit there. But then it took me about 2 years to decide to go to school. And I live next to the community college. Like, I'm not kidding. I could walk across the bridge and attend classes. It was that close. But I was terrified. I was absolutely terrified because I felt like I didn't deserve it. So I had to address that. And it took someone I knew going and getting financial aid and starting her classes. And she was a lot like I was. And I was like, she can do it. I can do it. Why not just go see what happens? And that is my entire school career. My school was, let's just see if it happens. So I had no GPA to go off of because I dropped out of high school. And so I started at the community college level to establish a GPA. And every quarter, I felt like a fraud. I felt like someone was going to come in and say, you don't belong here, probably because it actually happened to me in grade school. But, but I was afraid someone was going to walk in and say, you don't belong here. You shouldn't be doing this. You can't do this. All the way until I was working on my master's. Even then, I was still like waiting for someone to say I couldn't do it. And I was really worried about my GPA because I'd had a 4.0 GPA all the way through, and all of a sudden it was dropping down to like 3.7. And someone looked at me and said, when you're done and you go to get a job somewhere, you go to start your practice, do you think people are going to ask you what your GPA was? I'm like, oh yeah, that's right, huh?
I was going to bring that up earlier when EJ said that. I just want to say one more thing that I'm passionate about. I don't care whether you had a C and I don't care whether you had an A. Did you follow through? Did you do it?
Mm-hmm. Well, except for my doctors. Right. I want my doctors to have gotten an A+++++.
Amen. Especially my surgeons.
Right. Yeah, I'm going to be on the table. What was your GPA?
All of you put together. I've had so many more surgeries than both of you. Yes, I want my surgeon to have it. But somebody reminded me of that too. It's funny that you said that because I am a good student naturally because I do like to learn, but except in math, that's a whole foreign language. But somebody said to me, Lori, we just need you to get to a certain level. You know, you don't have to have an A in it. We just got to get you to pass it. And so I passed it. You know, I took tutors and whatever, but in nothing else, just math.
Right.
But they did remind me, and it was my professor, nobody's going to care whether this was a C or this was a B or this was an A. They're going to care, do you have the degree? And I personally know people within my life who were more of an average student, a C, B student, who are actually better and more passionate at their job than the A student. So I just feel like, you know, I don't know. I absolutely love school. I find that it was very, very helpful. Didn't have the same experience as EJ. I became friends with most of my professors. I loved it. I would sit in a classroom and soak it up like a sponge. I kept all my books. I actually read them from cover to cover.
Oh my God.
I know. You're dying over here, but I love to read. I love knowledge. I want to know more. And I was given that opportunity as a second chance in life later to do that. You know, it's funny. I was only a little younger than you are right now, EJ, when I went back to school full time, you know, and so I just really, I like what Tina said. It is a different experience for everyone, and we need to honor that. I feel bad that yours wasn't a good experience.
Well,
I loved it with every fiber of my being. Like,
yeah, I know you do. You've talked about it
in a way that I never knew was possible. So I want that for other people, you know.
Amen. Yeah. And sometimes I'm like kind of in a way envious and jealous that, you know, you had such a good experience, because I didn't. I remember sitting in an actual web design class. And the teacher, somebody asked a question in the classroom. The teacher had no idea what they were talking about. And so I raised my hand. I was able to answer the question. The teacher had no freaking clue what I was talking about. And yet I was able to answer the person's question, and it worked. And the teacher came up to me after. He's like, have you worked in this? I'm like, no, but I know what I'm doing. And there was another class. I remember going into one of my classes, and, you know, for a tech degree, you got to take like a Microsoft Office training and stuff. Oh my God, these teachers. I had my final project done the first week of class. And I was so bored. And the teacher, he's like, you might as well just be my like assistant, because he's like, you know more than I do. I'm like, oh God. And so yeah, I was bored. I took a calculus class to be challenged.
And you couldn't pay me to take a calculus class. And I would never even qualify
in that class. I got a 3.9 in the calculus class. I struggled. That was like my only struggle. I took pre-calc and like breezed through it. Like the teacher's like, why are you here? I'm like, because I need a challenge of some kind. Yeah. So anybody who chooses to go to college, I hope you have an experience like Lori. I hope you do. But from my experience, I would never go back to school. No, not if I'm going to sit in a class and do that again. I'm like, I had such a mix. I don't want to repeat that.
So I think we've talked about some of the highs and lows and personality things. T, what would be some of the tools? How do we use this to, lead us, guide us, direct us? What are some things we can share with our listeners and viewers?
Well, I think realizing that no matter where you're at, it's where you're at. It's not a race. It's not a competition. As far as, I mean, let's be real. When we get a job, when we want to do well, and we're competing against others for things, that can happen in certain job environments. And if that's your thing, if you like competition, that's great, because that's what it really boils down to: is what is each person, what drives them, what makes them feel good, what is their needs. because ultimately that's what we're trying to do, is meet our needs. Sometimes the bottom line need is finances. Sometimes the bottom line need is schedule. What do you need for a schedule? My daughter works 12-hour days, 4 days one week, 3 days another, so that she can be available to her children at certain times and make that wage. So, it is what your needs are. I didn't go back to school until my kids were teenagers, pretty much teenagers. So that opened up my availability to be able to go to school. Plus, here's another thing, a factor that's not quite getting pulled out. EJ, when you went to college, you were younger than Lori and I. Right. So your mindset and your emotional maturity and all that was in a different place than it is now. And was in a different place than Lori's and mine. We'd already had a lot of life experiences to tell us what we could and couldn't do, and to not, we would still get bored. I'm sure. I know I did, but boredom wasn't really a factor for us. Like, if we were bored with something, we were used to that. Okay, sometimes things are just boring, but it's a means to an end. So we were at a different place, maturity wise and age wise and all of that, when we started. So that's another thing. Everybody's got different factors. And so if you do have to take a job for job's sake, I would really encourage people to develop hobbies, because having something that we are passionate about and that we love to do that isn't about the day-to-day grind is a form of self-care. And it's a way to honor ourselves and take care of us, so that we can, whatever it is we're doing in our job, be able to do, because that's not all we are, is our job.
Yes. I think it's also important to remember, we've talked before about how the chronically ill within our society is the fastest growing group. And with having said that, with that, it is really important to be able to tap into passions and hobbies and things you desire, because you may not be able to do the job. So then you have to find value and comfort and encouragement in different ways. So chronically ill, as you're growing older, I think it is very, very important. And I'm glad I think I'm getting to watch both of my sons do this pretty well. One, I feel, has a little more balance than the other in this, but they both have their JOBs. But they have each pursued, outside of their JOBs, within their families and within their friends, their hobbies, their things that make them tick, so to speak. And I've been really glad to see them trying to balance that out, not give up the things that they like. Maybe they have to do them less, or they have to do them at different times, whatever. But I feel like they do both truly attempt to have a passion and hobbies and things that excite them outside of their JOB. Their JOB is paying the bills and taking care of their families and providing the insurance that's necessary. But that's all that it's doing. They're still pursuing their hobbies and their passions. And I like that.
Or even when we have our dream job, like I love what I do. I'm doing exactly what I set out to do that I thought I wasn't going to be able to do. I'm doing that, but that, despite my passion and doing it, cannot be all that I am.
Right.
Because then I'll burn out in it, and then I'll walk away feeling like I failed. Yeah. When it's most I know that my field is considered at risk for secondary trauma and whatnot, and burnout, high rates of burnout, etc. But here's the thing: I think any place, any job, anything you're doing you can burn out on it if you aren't paying attention. And I think sometimes my biggest theme, when I talk to people and give advice and work with my clients, all that, a lot of times it boils down to how we define something. That's just a common place I go, is stepping back and realize and checking in. How are we defining success? How are we defining productivity and our way, how we are contributing and whatnot. So I think, because I find that most people, when they're feeling dissatisfied, if we look at how they're defining aspects of their life, it really does come up as being one of the things that lead to dissatisfaction, is not defining things correctly.
Yeah.
Or accurately.
You guys brought up a good point, and I feel like I want to touch on this. My passion is writing. My hobby has been writing. And I really fell into this publishing stuff kind of randomly. And my business partner's he's like, you need to stop just staying. He's like, you need to take off the publishing hat. He's like, let's talk tech and stuff. And I'm like, there was a part of me that I'm like, no, this is what I want. Don't take this away from me. But then I was like, if I spend all of my time only focusing on helping other people publish and write, I'm going to lose the passion I have for writing, which is my hobby, my favorite thing to do. And so I'm like, maybe this is God's way. Is like, he's like, I know you're going to be a writer, but he's like, I don't want you to lose that. And so I've been kind of trying to kind of retrain my brain and my thinking on that, because I don't want to lose that passion for writing. Like this whole week, I've had like 4 or 5 ideas swirling around in my head, and I'm like, I cannot get them to go away, which is a good thing. I just keep forgetting to write them down, and then they space, and then it's like something else comes up. But you need, like Tina said, you need to have hobbies. You need to have passions and desires outside of it. I love going dancing. I don't get to do it a lot. Well, I've recently learned there's a few places here in the area that, when I was over in Tacoma, I was able to, there were a lot of other opportunities. So, so I have to look for that, but I need to find that again. And I'm really kind of narrowing down that I want to write. I want to be a published author. I have some things published out there right now, and that's going to happen. My goal is to have it by my birthday, my first official novel published. So yeah, I'm not going to give that up. And I'm kind of grateful that I am kind of slightly transitioning to a little more of the tech and stuff, so I can still have my writing as my kind of my thing, but I can share it too with everybody. So yeah.
And a little piece of what you're talking about, and I'm also thinking of Lori's journey as well, is sometimes we can get so focused on the end, like the result that we want. I'll throw myself under the bus. Okay, so I wanted to be a therapist, specifically a trauma therapist, and wonderfully, I am that now. But I also was prepared that if I couldn't get to it one way or have exactly that, what are my alternatives that are just as valuable to me? And I did have a moment where a few years ago where I really had to be aware of that. And I couldn't find a job in my field. I let go of my license because I couldn't afford to keep it going. And I was just doing temp jobs. And I was really just having some serious conversations with God about, getting this degree and not being able to use it. And I was at a recycling center. I was working at a recycling center, and there's this day I was just really, really in a mood in my conversation with God. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anyway, so this car comes through, and they were regulars. And at the end of them unloading their recycling and whatnot, they looked at me and said, "We always come on this day because we know you're going to be here, and we always feel better when we leave." I was like, "Oh, that's sweet." Second car, same thing. "We always come on this day because we know you're going to be here." Third car said the same thing. And I went, Oh, I see what you're saying, God. I don't need an office. So you have to sometimes stop and look at, can you bring your passion to where you're at?
Amen.
Can you bring your sense of satisfaction and productivity and all of those things to where you're at right now? You don't let go of that long-term dream. You don't have to do that.
Right.
Sometimes you might have to tweak it and change what it looks like and whatnot. But along the way of getting to where you want to go, sometimes you need to stop and check in and find the joy in what you're doing now. And if there's no joy, can you find the joy? Can you find something in it?
Amen.
Beautifully said.
Well said.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think that helps too, you know, the last few years, the pandemic really shifted how a lot of people worked. And there's a lot more remote jobs and virtual jobs and work at home jobs. A lot of them that were previously stuck in a cubicle, but then they're realizing we don't need a big building if we just send our workers home and let them work from home. And as long as they get the work done, we don't care how it gets done, you know? And that I think has opened up a lot of opportunities for even like single parents who are usually a stay-at-home mom, or like couples who one is like in the military and there's a stay-at-home mom with the kids. You know, she can do something from home and still have her kids and be a mom too. So there's a lot of
semi-retired or chronically ill or disabled.
Exactly. Yeah. So there's a lot more opportunity. So I know that, you know, the pandemic was definitely a struggle for a lot of us, but I do think there's some things that came out of it that are pretty positive. And I think this is going to help a lot of people too in the future of any job. Like, I'm grateful. Like, my business partner keeps saying, he's like, he wants the wing of like the tech wing in our area. Because I'm here and then I don't have to relocate. I'm like, well, great, because you're going to be paying for my relocation costs because I'm not doing that. But yeah, so I'm grateful for what it's opening up. And yeah, I may have an office, but it doesn't mean I'm going to be at the office all the time. I can virtually be in there and check emails and stuff. And he has realized, because he has listened to one of the podcasts, that I don't need to be talking to clients all the time and that he wants me to just do the work. And I'm like, he's like, yeah, I'll just slide the pizza box underneath the door and, you know, give you a list of things to do. And I'm like, perfect. That's what I want. Just tell me what you want and I'll do it. You know? Because I'm like, yeah. I was like, yay, he finally figured it out.
Yeah. Well, ladies, this has been another fun topic and another one I'm glad we dived into. I tell you, I love how we'll pick a topic, you know, and we'll be like, okay, let's look at it this way. And then we go to dive into it and we get, and I don't know, I always enjoy them. I always feel like I'm learning something, I'm growing myself. And I really hope our viewers and listeners that's what they're getting to, is they're learning and growing and identifying things within their life that they either can find joy in or find ways to learn about or, you know, seek help with. And it was nice this weekend at the women's retreat. I got to talk to a couple of friends who I don't talk to often, and they both were like, yeah, your podcast is getting really good. I'm like, oh, yay, people are actually watching and hearing. And it was just very encouraging. So, yeah. So, ladies, thank you so much once again for another great podcast.
It's fun winging it. I'm at my best.
I love it.
Give me a like strict script, or, you know, I got to say this, then this.
Yeah. Just a friendly reminder, anything discussed in this podcast is not to be used as a diagnosis or a replacement for conversations with your own doctors, therapists, psychologists, or medical professionals. This episode is on YouTube and most major podcast platforms. If you're not a subscriber, we'd love for you to be one. So don't forget to like and click the subscribe button on YouTube to keep up with our upcoming episodes. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram as Behind the Mask PC. You can also email feedback or future episode ideas to behindthemaskpc@gmail.com. To find us, EJ, Lori, and T online, links for us will be in the description of this episode. And on behalf of the ladies and myself, thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye.